Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started.
And if folks join us, then they'll join us. And Stephanie, just so you know, we're gonna mute both our sound and your microphone, so that Justine can do a little bit of a presentation, and then we'll have time for questions and answers after that.
Cool.
So thank you for joining us. This is the APSA webinar. This is the second APSA webinar from the Diversity and Inclusion Programs team. And this webinar is on sort of like late grad school application deadlines and spring semester priorities and the transition to graduate school over the summer. And we are joined by Justine Davis, who is a third-year PhD student at UC Berkeley. Hi, Justine. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
And I think that we can just get started. And then, like I said, we'll have time for questions and answers after Justine goes through what she has to share.
Wonderful.
Okay.
And just being joined by Adrian.
Okay, before you start, Justine, Adrian, can you hear us? Adrian? Okay, so we will chat with her, but we will just go ahead and get started. And so Justine, why don't you go ahead and start? We'll just chat with her on the side.
Okay. Cool. So I am, as was mentioned, I'm a third year in the PhD program in political science at Berkeley. I study comparative politics and political behavior, and I focus primarily on sub-Saharan Africa. And just to kind of preface, I actually took 6 years off from undergrad before I pursued a PhD. So some of the advice that I'm going to give is geared towards folks who are going straight from undergrad, but I can also provide input on suggestions if you plan on taking time off before you go to graduate school. Okay, cool. So basically, if you are in the process of applying, many deadlines were early December or December 15th, but there are some that are January. And so the only real advice I can give about that is just to make sure that your letter writers know that the deadlines are in January. Oftentimes, with Christmas and New Year's and people traveling, they may not be cognizant of deadlines. And it actually happened to me when I applied for graduate school. One of my letter writers was like in doing field work in China. And so she actually didn't have access to internet. And so I really panicked that she wouldn't be able to submit the letter on time. But I gave her advance warning, and she actually did submit it on time. So that's the advice I would say if you're applying for these later deadlines in January. And then after that, you're just kind of waiting to hear back from programs. But there's a lot that you can do, especially if you're still in undergrad, to kind of prepare for graduate school in political science. So I have some suggestions on that. So one of the things that I wish that I had known before pursuing a PhD in political science was how methods centric it is. I had taken a statistics course in undergrad when I was a freshman, so that was 2004. So basically it was 10 years since I'd taken a math class, but when I started the PhD program. So everything was really rusty, and I had to really bone up on those skills. So just a couple of suggestions. Taking a statistics or an econometrics course could be useful. In particular, at least I know at Berkeley and in a number of programs, they really focus on the potential outcomes framework, which is really geared towards causal inference. So if you can take a course that teaches causal inference, that may really help you prepare for PhD in political science. Additionally, boning up on like programming skills, the softwares that are used in programs. So we use R almost exclusively in our stats courses. Many of my advisors use Stata. But Stata you have to pay for. R is free, and it's much more powerful as far as the things you're able to do. So taking a programming course either in your undergrad institution or online could help you really have a leg up when you start a PhD program. Additionally, if you're interested in other types of programming languages such as Python, I do a lot of web scraping for news articles, so I use Python. You could take a course on that. There's a lot of really great online resources for that. And a lot of because we use a lot of R, a lot of our output is in LaTeX, and so learning how to code in LaTeX may also be useful. If you're not interested in doing quantitative using quantitative methods, you may want to look into taking some qualitative methods training. So, for example, if you plan on using ethnography as a research method, you could take a course on that. In anthropology, often sociology programs have interviewing technique courses that may be useful. So basically just trying to prepare for the kinds of tools that you would use in a PhD program. Another piece of advice is take time to do some internships or to work in the summertime, because any experience is good experience. Getting exposed to politics in the real world will help you as you embark on the PhD program. So here I've just provided a couple of links. I get a lot of emails from various listservs about programs. This UNC Charlotte undergrad program is a research experience, and so you work with a faculty member in their department to do research, so that might be of interest to students. There are also several congressional internship programs. Here I've just highlighted a few. And the Scoville Peace Fellowship is actually an internship that's paid in DC working for an organization. And since I work primarily on conflict, that's something that I'm familiar with. But I'm sure there are lots of other opportunities as well for various different subfields. And I put the links here too, so when they circulate the PDFs, hopefully you'll be able to access those. Another thing to consider is, when you are pursuing a PhD, you're just going to be doing research, right? So getting started on the research game would be really good. So if you have written a senior thesis or you're in the process of writing a senior thesis, it may be useful to try and present your research at conferences. So I know that the Midwest deadline for undergraduate submissions has passed, as has so NCUR is the National Conference for Undergraduate Research. I think their deadline has passed as well, but that may be something worthwhile to attend if you can. APSA's deadline is in early January, so that might be something to apply to either to attend or to present any research that you have. Attending conferences is really crucial, not just so you can learn what's going on in the field, but also for networking opportunities. So you go through the program and you find the people whose research you're interested in, and you go and you talk to these folks. And this is a great way to start making networks that you'll need when you're in the PhD program. Another thing that you could do is start thinking about funding, or fellowships. So one thing that you'll be doing throughout your graduate career and onwards is applying for grants and fellowships. And so looking into possible other funding opportunities over the summer that you could apply to in the fall. So there's a Ford Predoctoral Fellowship, which is aimed towards students of color or students from underrepresented backgrounds. And the deadline is in November. So you could start even preparing those materials, thinking about letter writers and things of that sort. And that's 3 years of funding. And it's a really great opportunity. I'm a predoctoral fellow from Ford, and it's highly competitive, but it's great to be able to access that network after the fact. There's also an Nsf Fellowship that's due around the same time, October, I think, in which it's another 3-year funding package, and also very competitive, but really great to have on your CV. And for funding, it also, one thing to think about these kinds of fellowships is they change what you will be required to do at your institution. So for example, my package from Berkeley, my funding package, was 5 years of funding, of which 2 years had to be teaching. But since I got the Ford Fellowship, I was able to not have to teach for 1 year. And so this is a really good way to buy time and to do your research, and instead of having to teach, which also takes up time. And the NSF can do the same thing. Since I'm a comparativist, we do a lot of field research. And so I put 2 links here for field research opportunities that you can apply for in the fall for the next year, so your first summer. And that's primarily geared towards people who are planning to do research outside of the United States. So that's it. I think I covered some basics and some suggestions that I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the whole process or about graduate school in general. So let me know what you think.
Thank you, Justine. Are there any questions from either Stephanie or Adrian?
I was really interested in attending or presenting at APSA. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if there was any travel funding for undergraduates, because I saw that there was potential travel funding for graduate students, but I didn't see anything for undergrads. Does that exist?
Right now, we're working on expanding not only the number of travel funds that are available, but also the, I believe, kind of the categories that you may be able to receive travel funds for. So maybe take a look at the eligibility and then write into the email that's attached to it. I know that in the past, the focus for the travel funds for APSA has been for grad students, international students, and so but I don't know if you're disqualified if you're an undergrad. So you may be eligible to apply. Another point that I would also just share is that the MFP program, and Stephanie is a new minority fellow that was named for this year. Justine is an MFP from 2014-15. That we offer MFP travel grants, but they're typically available for students who are not currently receiving funds that year. So you as a new fellow would have to wait until your funding dispersals are passed before you would be eligible for that. But I would send an email into the APSA travel grant system to see if you're eligible.
Okay.
Also, Stephanie, once you find out which programs you've been accepted in and which institution you're going to attend, often departments have funding for students to attend conferences. So, because APSA is Labor Day weekend, so by that point you will have already been enrolled in whichever program you're in. And so 2 things to ask about. One is the department funding, whether they have it for conferences, but also graduate divisions in the university sometimes have funding for students to go to conferences. So, for example, here at Berkeley, there's a student opportunity fund, and they'll give you $300 to attend a conference if you just apply for it. So these are all things to ask, both the institution or the department that you get accepted in, but also graduate students that may know about these resources.
Cool, thank you.
Right, that's a very good point. And whenever you're attending any of these conferences, it's always a good idea to check on the conference website itself to see if there are any additional funds available. Adrian, did you have any Any questions? I should also mention that Adrienne is also a new MFP, so we're happy to have both of you guys on the call. Let's see. I don't know if she heard me, but.
Oh, she's asking a question in the chat box. So she
Got it.
says, I submitted most of my applications and now I'm doing the waiting game. Oh, where did the chat go?
Yeah.
I'm really just interested in anything you didn't expect before grad school and the adjustment. Also, any suggestions or advice for putting together a strong fellowship application? I'm at work right now and don't have access to my mic.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Anything I didn't expect before grad school? I think as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, the thing I didn't expect was the emphasis on math and statistics. So I took a lot of time off and I did international studies for undergrad. So I didn't take many political science classes. So we have at Berkeley a math camp in the summer before you start the program, and they had emailed and said, yes, you need to like review calculus, and I had never taken a calculus course before, and so I was like, review, I have to like teach myself how to do integrals and like all this stuff. So that was the thing that kind of caught me off guard and that I had to scramble for in the summer. So I took like an online calculus course, and I took R, like a MOOC, what are they called? The free online courses. I took a course on R and programming before I started the program because I felt like I might be behind if I didn't do that. So that was one thing that I didn't expect before grad school. What else? The first year is just a lot of reading and a lot of getting to know the field generally. And so I think for many of the students that came straight from undergrad, it was a bit of an adjustment to like workload because it's very different from, a few articles a week that you might have to read for a course in undergrad. I mean, I was reading 300, 400 pages a week, like whole books for like a course in a week. So it was a lot more intense as far as that goes. So yeah, I think those were the two like changes in workload and time management, but also like getting good at math were two really things I wasn't expecting. So suggestions for putting together a strong fellowship application. So having great letters. I think some of the same advice that you would have for applying for putting together your graduate application apply to fellowship applications. So having good letter writers, really tweaking your personal statement to fit what the fellowship requires. So for example, I talked about the Ford predoctoral fellowship. They put a lot of emphasis on what you'll do after you receive your degree in promoting diversity. And so when you're writing your personal statements, you want to keep that kind of in the back of your mind of like how you can frame your research and the work that you do in a way that demonstrates to the Ford Foundation that you will be committed to increasing diversity in academia and incorporating diversity into your curriculum in the classroom. So really paying attention to what the fellowship requires, and if it's from an institution, like looking at what their mission is, to make sure that you kind of are in line with what they're looking for.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions for Justine? Oh, 1 second. Just a second. Okay, sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I had a more general question on the UNC Charlotte undergraduate program. Would I be eligible to apply for that if I'm graduating in May?
That's a good question. I actually don't know that much about this program. one great thing about the Ford Fellowship is there's a listserv, and so it came through the listserv a couple of weeks ago. So I would check when they circulate the PDF, I'd check the link to see. So I also have a question. Adrian sent me a question about the research proposal that Ford and NSF asked for. So one thing is they're not going to expect that as a first-year graduate student, you're going to have a really in-depth research design where you're very explicit in like, oh, I'm going to use this and this sample, and this is the number of respondents, for example, if you do a survey or an experiment. So it's going to be more general. What they're really looking for is your capacity to conduct research, and to ask good questions that are broad and relevant to not only your field but the academia in general. And so the advice about that is to kind of demonstrate that you know the literature on whatever your question is. You know what's feasible as far as what you are able to do to study that question. Demonstrate that it's a puzzle. So there's a lot of emphasis on puzzles. So why does this thing happen here, but it doesn't happen elsewhere? Kinds of questions. And if you have past experience that will contribute to your knowledge about this question, that's really important to demonstrate as well. What else? So as far as, not to be very super detailed, but detailed enough that you can demonstrate, like, I know how to answer this question, and I have the capacity to do it, and I know this is an interesting question as well. Yeah. Okay, so Adrian sent me another question about funding packages. Oh, so this is great. This is a great question, and some advice that I got when I was looking at which programs to accept. So you can leverage other programs' packages against your preferred program. So let's say you get into Harvard, Berkeley, and Yale. And Harvard and Yale offer you like really big packages. You can go to Berkeley and say, hey, these other programs are offering me this much money. What can you do to match it? And they have a lot of discretion as far as what they are able to change in your package. So they may move teaching around for you, or they may apply for you to receive university fellowship. So you can leverage both the package itself, so the requirements such as second year teaching or something like that. You can say, oh, well, Harvard says I only have to teach in my third year, and then Berkeley may be able to move something around for you to match that. But also in the amount of funding that you get. As you can imagine, the private institutions can offer a lot more funding, but that doesn't mean that the public institutions can't try to match that. And so that's what I did. I got into Indiana and Berkeley, and I said, Indiana's offering me more money, and Berkeley's like, okay. And they scrambled and found a pot of money to bring up my package a little bit. So additionally, so packages typically will have some stipulation about either teaching or graduate student research. So be sure to look. You want to know how many years of funding is offered without those other requirements. So that's just pure funding without the stipulation of teaching or graduate student research. So you want to look at that. You also want to look at whether they're offering summer funding. So that's really important. I know with the MFP you get some summer funding, but that could be on top of what you may receive from your institution. And so that's also one thing. If they can't give you more money for the year, you can say, hey, is it possible for you to give me summer funding for the 5 years in the program or something like that? So looking at those things to see what's kind of like required for that funding. how important is a school's rank? So ranking is really arbitrary. So like after, I mean, we know which institutions are like the top, but after like the top 10, it's kind of like arbitrary, like how schools are ranked. But it doesn't matter. You can leverage any kind of package against any other package. And so if an institution really wants you to come, like they will fight for you to get the funding that you need. So don't hesitate to try. Basically the advice I give is like, it never hurts to ask, right? And so saying, is there any way we can get a little bit more funding on here isn't going to hurt you.
Great. Other questions?
I think I have a question that I would like to ask. So since everyone on the call is part of the Minority Fellowship Program, Justine, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you have leveraged your participation in the Minority Fellowship Program through APSA toward any other funding or research that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. So actually I benefited from the funding for conference participation that is offered through APSA. To attend APSA in Philly, I applied and I was presenting a paper at APSA, and so I was able to benefit from that funding via the Minority Fellows Program. Also, so the program sends letters to the institutions you applied to, and I mean I guess I'll never know like how much that extra letter helped, but I imagine that it meant something, right? So because it's coming from APSA to a political science department, I think it demonstrates that you are, you have the ability to become a good political scientist if you can, if you're able to get a fellowship from the Political Science Association. So I think that's one way that the program can help students. Also, and then generally, I think what's great is at APSA and at Midwest, the MFP kind of allows for networking opportunities. So at APSA, there's a reception, and so you get to meet other MFP alumni, and so that's just another great opportunity that it affords me.
Great, thank you. Another component of the program that we are continuing to work on is that for all of the new MFP scholars, we're also inviting you all to request a mentor through the APSA mentor program. And if that's something that you, Adrienne or Stephanie, are interested in, you'll be receiving an email about that soon, and then you'll be able to share information about what type of mentor you're interested in, and that we'll be able to match you. We try to match MFP scholars with MFP alumni like Justine or alumni from another APSA program. And if we don't have that opportunity, then we are certainly able to match you with any number of other mentoring volunteers that we have in our system who are faculty members from around the country studying various topics in political science. Great. I see there's one more question from Adrienne.
Yeah, I see.
Okay.
So actually I applied for the Minority Fellows Program at the same time as the Ford Fellowship. So the fall before I started the program. And I didn't get the Ford that year. But what is good is that the Ford gives you can get feedback on your application. And so like it will have how basically the two reviewers ranked your application. And so then you'll know where to improve for the next time you apply. And so they said, where were my weak spots? I think previous research needed to be improved, like the previous research essay needed to be improved. So I went in and I made all of those changes and reapplied and got it my first year in the program. So applying now, I don't know if the deadline's already passed. I think it has. But if you applied now and you don't get it, definitely take advantage of that tool. Another thing that's helpful that many institutions have is they have Ford liaisons within the institution that can read your essays and give you advice. So the woman here is in African American studies, so I just went down to her office with my essays, and she made suggestions on how to tighten them to make me a better candidate. The other thing that's to think about with the Ford, if you are applying in your first year, is that you should have letters from faculty at your institution. So you might want to start thinking about those relationships from the get-go in August, if you can. Meeting with people who you want to work with from the beginning will help you get really good letters from those folks.
Justine, I have a follow-up question to that question about the application process for the Ford or for any other type of fellowship program. How much did you work with your advisors and professors at your undergraduate institution to help you prepare for applying for these fellowship programs? And how much of it was your own, like you working independently and just kind of pushing through and getting all these deadlines in?
Yeah, so I had a really great undergraduate mentor who would read my essays and offer feedback, and then she would write my letters as well. But generally, it was me working on these things and then sending drafts to potential letter writers over the course of the application process. Which was, so the hard thing about the Ford is this, like getting these relationships started when you're just a first year, because you take one class with someone, and so you don't really know, they don't know you that well. And so trying to get to know people, another person that could be a good potential letter writer is the chair of the admissions committee, because they will have read your file. And what was really lucky for me is that the chair my year is also my advisor. So he was the chair, and then now he's advising me, so he knows me really well. But at that time, he knew me better probably than the other faculty members that hadn't seen my application. So that's something to consider when you're thinking about who to talk to.
Great, thank you. Stephanie, Adrian, do you have any other questions? Okay, I see one from Adrian.
So you're right. I think that's one of so there's two things to kind of fix this problem of how well a faculty member might know you. One is that the letters aren't actually due until January. So that does give them a semester effectively to get to know you and write you a good letter, despite the fact that the application itself is due in November. And then, so I had, Ford was 3 letters? No, it was 4 letters, I think. I had 1 from undergrad, I had 1 from my master's program, and I had 2 from Berkeley. So one was my advisor, who was the admissions chair, so he knew me well enough to write me a letter. And the other person, I was enrolled in a class with her, and I felt really nervous going to her in October to ask for a letter because she didn't know me at all. And so what she requested from me was all of my essays, transcripts, all my transcripts, my CV, and she, I guess, wrote me a good letter, despite the fact that she had only known me for a month and a half or so. So that's what I mean when I say trying to get to know people from the get-go. It's nerve-wracking, it's hard, it's kind of scary to go talk to faculty, but most faculty are there to try and help students. And it also shows that you're really committed and ambitious if you start from, August going to talk to faculty members. Most programs will assign you an advisor for your first year, and it may or may not be someone who's in your field. And so that person going and talking to them in August when you get assigned may be a good way to kind of feel out whether they'd be a good letter writer and to talk to them about your interest, and so they can get to know you a little better. And they may also have suggestions on other people in the department that could write you letters or that you could work with in the future.
Great, wonderful. I had one question. So I know that you, Justine, participated in ICPSR, and you had also received a fellowship, I think, to attend that program. Can you speak a little bit about why you decided to go to ICPSR, when you went, what it is, what you did, and if it might be an opportunity that students like Stephanie and Adrian might be interested in?
Yeah, I should have added ICPSR on the slides. So ICPSR is a methods training in the summer. There's 2 sessions. You can do the entire summer, so the 2 sessions, or you could do 1 session. I did the first session. It's a 4-week course where every day you're taking a class in methodology, quantitative methodology primarily. So the reason I took that is because I recognized that I like my weaknesses in quantitative methods. As I mentioned, I had not taken any stats courses before coming to graduate school, so I really wanted to bone up on those skills. I took a maximum likelihood estimation course. I took 2 math courses where we were doing essentially like matrix algebra, so all the things that go on behind regression. And I took a regression course, and they have a lot of short courses, so they had an R programming course as well. And then they also have a lot of lecture, like 1, 2, 3 day lectures throughout the summer. And so it was really cool because I got to meet other political scientists, other sociologists from other departments there that summer. And it also was very intense, like every single day doing math for, from 9 until 4. But I do think it really helped my skills, because these are people who are really good at teaching these topics. And it's the only thing I was focusing on at the time. Whereas when you're in school, you're taking a stats class, you're taking an intro to American politics, so your time is really split between these various different fields. And so it was nice to have that to focus on. So there's a couple of fellowships to attend ICPSR. I received the fellowship for students of color. There's also a fellowship for women to attend. And then the department that you're in may also offer funding to do summer training. So when you're visiting programs, you may want to ask about this. Like, is it possible to attend ICPSR? There's also a qualitative methods summer institute called IQMR. And so those, you want to find out if the programs will pay for you to do that. And Berkeley does pay for you to attend one summer institute. But I wanted to go to the qualitative methods one this summer, and so that's why I applied for the fellowship to do ICPSR, so that I could keep the money from Berkeley to do this other institute next summer.
Great, thank you. And I would just add to that, online on the APSA Diversity and Inclusion website, and we'll send a link to both you, Stephanie, and Adrian. There's a link to diversity and inclusion resources, and one of those links is an external link that provides you with a search engine to search for summer programs, fellowships, things of that nature. You can just put in whatever search term you're interested in. We even have the MFP and the RBSI program loaded into that database, so that students that are interested in finding programs like that can find it, but there's thousands of programs that you can find that are catered to the need that you might have. And so we'll make sure to send you that link so that you can start looking for opportunities. Okay. Other questions? I think if not, we will probably take this time to thank Justine for her time and a wonderful presentation, great information. This is another example of why speaking to as many students as possible is really important in terms of helping you to understand what it's going to be like to attend grad school. I think Justine's presentation also highlighted the importance of taking your own initiative, finding what programs you need to help you to advance to the next step, having great communication and keeping the communication lines open with your advisors, with your mentors, starting early. All of those things help to demonstrate that you are a serious student, that you're someone that department should invest in. Departments are always kind of, keeping an eye on you guys, whether or not you know it or not, in terms of how serious is she, how dedicated is she making progress, is she on schedule? So the more that you can do to show that is what is happening, the better. And the more you keep in touch with your advisors and your mentors, and even when you attend events like APSA, or when you get a fellowship, or when you go to ICFSR, let them know that you're doing this, because it also demonstrates that you're very devoted and serious about the work that you're doing. And they will appreciate knowing that, and they may also kind of send opportunities your way when they hear about those things. So great. Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you so much for joining us. Great to meet you, Stephanie. Great to have you online, Adrian.
Can I add one more thing? If you, Stephanie and Adrian, have any junior friends who are interested in PhD programs in political science, let them know that the application deadline for the Ralph Bunche Summer Institute is on January 20th, and that they should get started on their applications now. And there's a lot more information about what that program is on our website.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Justine.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.